This is a podcast from Rover.
Welcome to Parents with Met, where we chat about the magic and mess of parenting. Now today I am pumped to have with us on the couch Richie Hardcore. Richie is a retired multiple New Zealand Muay Thai champion who has spent time as a community worker in drug and alcohol harm reduction, a campaigner against domestic and sexual violence, and a sexual consent educator. Now we chat about the beautiful invitation to grow through parenting, the healing that can take place, and the joy that can be found in removing layers of hurt so we can be silly and find the joy in the simple moments of parenting. As you can imagine, this is a pretty deep conversation, so it's not one for little ears. Hey Richie, thank you for saying yes and coming and hanging out with us this morning.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm sorry, I thought it was online at first.
We're old school. We're like, come and have a cuppa and sit with us.
No, I love that. It's actually, I think, reflective of what's lacking in society is face-to-face conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to be here without a screen in between us.
It all worked out. I'm looking forward to talking about so many things today, but it's great to start with a bit of an idea of your family. So can you introduce us to who's in your whānau?
Yeah, so I live with my wife, Claire Robbie, and her son, my stepson, Jack. And then we had a baby 2 years ago, Raphael. So yeah, there's four of us. And grandparents are super helpful too. So Claire's parents and my mum are really helpful with our little Bubba as well. So yeah, it's a pretty interconnected, intergenerational whānau at the moment.
There are things that come along our way that often surprise us. What surprised you about being a dad?
Oh, how fun it is, I suppose. I think in my head, I can have a primacy to look at like what could go wrong. Raphael means God has healed. That's the translation of the name, and it has been very healing for me to have a little baby. And even before that, when I met Jack 7 years ago, he was 3 years old, and it's been a real, I don't know, like it's been a real softening for me. I think for myself and for a lot of men that I know, there's quite a hardening process that you go through life. You put up like walls and barriers and things to keep yourself safe emotionally and physically. And then to have little boys and do them justice, you actually need to take that armor off. And so it's been really a fun process doing that with my kids, you know. Like I'm surprised at just how much they make me laugh. And as much as I'm tired and my hair's thinning at a much faster rate than I'd like, I wouldn't swap it for anything. Yeah, it's a real joy.
Yeah, I love that softening that kids do. And you can invite it in or you can be a bit staunch about it, but children are a great way of bending us and softening us. And I think we reach the heights of joy, and sometimes there's some low parts as well in parenting, but I love that you've allowed your heart to soften towards your kids.
Yeah, it's not that I walked around with like a mean mug all the time. Like I like to think I have a good sense of humor, and if you know me personally, I talk a lot of nonsense, but yeah, they have sort of taken that to another level, you know. Like I think I carried a lot of self-consciousness about being silly and having little kids. You have to be silly.
You do.
You have to get down on their level and vibe with them. And yeah, it's cool. It's been cool to help me get to that space, I think.
Yeah, playfulness is such a big thing. And I kind of forgot how to play for a while.
Yes.
I was like, okay, like getting back into it and finding the silly and embracing it. I think kids are really good teachers of that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, my kids tell me, like, sit down and like play with some trains, dude.
Yeah, my boy loves role play, and it's like all doing all the voices, and I find it the hardest part of play, but it's joy to him when I sit down and I'm like the little characters.
Yeah, I'm bad at that. But my it's been interesting because I haven't been like super close with my mother as an adult, but she's come back into the fold a lot, particularly since our son was born, and just watching her just like be goofy.
Yeah.
And he just loves it. Like he'll crack up, and yeah, it's interesting to witness. Yeah. And try and figure out how do I kind of loosen up a little more sometimes.
interesting too. I found that quite healing for me and my dad's relationship of, like you say, seeing him in a different light and getting a bit goofy and seeing him as a grandfather was like another sort of healing that happened for me. You mentioned your stepson, and I had a stepdad growing up, and I remember kind of feeling a little bit of a disconnect with that name. But I heard recently that a step-parent is someone who steps in and steps up, and I like that. I'm like, yeah, okay, stepdad, that works now. Is that sort of how you see it?
Yeah, that's actually a really nice shift, right, in the perception of that language. Because, yeah, I do feel like, I don't really feel like a step-parent. Like, I've raised Jack, because his father's around too. Like, he's with his dad every week, and his dad's awesome. He's a really awesome dad. So he's not lacking in a male figure. But it is stepping into this role. Like, starting a relationship with someone who has a child is a whole extra level of communication and negotiation and patience and growth and understanding, and you really have to be ready for it. You really have to step up and be aware that there is a different dynamic that you need to, if you want to do it justice for your relationship with the person you're building with and for their child. You have to, like, be ready for that, you know?
Yeah.
And you have to kind of be conscious about that and look for your blind spots, and you have to do a lot of growing, and it's all good stuff, I think. Yeah. So I think I really like your framing. That's the word I was looking for. I really like how you frame it. Yeah, it is stepping up, because if you don't, then everyone suffers.
Have you got any advice for maybe someone who's starting a relationship with someone with a child, or maybe even someone that's listening going that I really am at that stage, I would like to invite someone in, but how do I do that, or what should I be thinking about?
Oh, that's a big question.
It is that.
I haven't even drunk my coffee yet. I think for me, trying to take it, because he's already got a father, right? And, like, I'm not trying to, like, push him out of the way. I'm just trying to co-parent, like, I'm just trying to add more support in our day-to-day life for my wife and for the boys, and share my perspectives and take some of the household load and things. I remember when Claire and Jack moved into my house some years ago, and Jack was much younger, and we got into, like, roughhouse play, and she said, oh wow, he never does that with me, like, ever. And it was like a male bonding sort of thing, and he loved jumping on me and, like, having little battles and play fights, and I remember doing that as a boy. Yeah, I'm sort of off topic of your question, though. You're like, what, dude? What's it got to do with the life?
Well, I suppose
rough house with your kids. Yeah, I think just take it slow, I guess, would be the best advice, and not try and tell people what to do, because they do have an established dynamic. So I think if you're coming into a relationship with someone who does have children, be willing to, like, listen and be empathetic, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about the rough housing, Richie, that's a really good thing. It's been researched a bit, and it's sort of the thing that dads will often do, and great for teaching boys and girls almost the limits of fighting, and when it hurts, you pause and you're teaching them stuff like that. So it's got some wonderful kind of boundaries that you can put in place, as well as just getting rid of that energy and that beautiful connection that they just want it because it's physical.
Yeah.
And they're touching you, and it's just lovely.
Yeah, it's I didn't have the best childhood, but I do have good memories of doing that with my own father. So it's actually quite nice to do it with my own kids now, see that sort of intergenerational positivity, and allows me to reflect on something that was good when I was little, like healthy dynamics of play fighting, and it's fun.
Cool. So Richie, you've gone from fighting in the ring to now fighting for social justice. How did that come about?
I was going to say fighting children. Like,
Yeah.
So, whoa.
I think those things happened kind of actually quite parallel. So I started competitive fighting when I was 13 years old, and then I retired at 33. So 20 years of competition in one sort of another. And within that 20 years, I guess I always had a natural sense of observance of injustice. Like, I would get really upset when things are unfair. And I remember getting upset watching Our World, you know, like, do you remember that TV series? And it'd be like, we're watching at some chimpanzees, and then like David Attenborough's like, and then the people came. And I'd get really bummed out, you know, and they're burning down rainforests or whatever. And that's not lessened, actually. I've just had to learn to temper it in the age of social media, because historically I've said stupid things on the internet come from a reactive space rather than a considered space. How did that come about? Well, I actually grew up in a very politicized musical culture. I listened to a lot of like political hip-hop music from a young age. From like 12, 13, I'm listening to like Public Enemy and stuff like that. And then I got into like punk and hardcore music, and they carried the anger that I felt inside, but it wasn't channeled to things that were destructive, like drugs and violence. It was more channeled towards politics or like social change, or what can you do for yourself to change yourself if you can't change the world around you. A lot of the music I grew up listening to and continue to listen to talks about things like that. And then as I moved into my adulthood, you know, I traveled a bit. I remember going to Mexico, and I went to a place called Chiapas, which had undergone like a revolution and led by indigenous people. And there was a movement called the Zapatistas. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Anyway, don't worry. When I went back to university a couple years later, I was like, how do I understand that poverty that I experienced? You know, because when I first went to Mexico, I was 24, and little children would come and like lick the plate of when we'd get up. And I first went to New York when I was only 19. And back then, in 2000, New Zealand didn't have the entrenched inequality that we see now every time we go down the street, right? Like, now we are a deeply unequal society, and we have like really high rates of homelessness, and we have a lot of economic disparity, and you can live within a city block and have completely different understandings of the world that we live in, right? That wasn't the case 20 years ago. Would you agree?
Yep.
And so when I first went to New York and I walked past a dead homeless person, really sat with me, you know, I can still think about that. So I went to university, and I really wanted to understand, like, why is the world like this? What are the systems in place that have led to this? It surely can't be natural, can it? And I did a lot of academic study on it. Yeah, I did my bachelor's degree and my honors degree and my master's degree more recently. To look at, I looked a lot at like Latin America. Obviously, I've been traveling to Mexico, and I've been through South America and Cuba and other countries, and it gave me a skill set, I suppose, that you can apply to any context. If you're looking at historical, socioeconomic, and political causatives of social injustice, gave me a skill set to apply to social justice. And I think where I get frustrated is that as someone who's in their 40s now, the dynamic around activism has changed a lot, which actually makes me feel quite at odds with the modern social justice movement, compared to when I was, you know, going on marches against the war in Iraq, or encouraging the New Zealand government to divest from like, you know, different, you know, companies and stuff. So yeah, it's shifted a lot, but I still want things to be better, you know. I work with the people who are products of all manner of trauma in their personal lives, and systematically you can look at the historical drivers of why that happens. And I think I took to answer your question, the emotions that helped me as a fighter, and that could have easily burnt me up, like in a self-destructive way. I burnt a lot of them out fighting people in a way that would not get me in trouble, and then have put that same energy into my education and activism. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Because you can use your hurt feelings for good or bad,
yes,
right?
You can.
And I have a lot of hurt feelings.
Yeah.
And I've tried my best to turn the coal into diamonds, as it were. Yeah. Yeah,
you've harnessed something really important and redirected it, or directed it really well.
To be fair, like it's actually a real blessing. I gave this talk to a bunch of like wealthy business people at like some ASB dinner. And I can't even remember what the moot point was, but the talk was essentially how all the worst things that happened to me were actually the best things that happened to me. That's not very concise, but I went through like a list of like terrible things that have happened in my life. If dear listener, my life's not terrible, but like, you know, like I really enjoyed it, but you know, some tough stuff's happened. And if I hadn't had those experiences, I wouldn't be doing what I do now. And I get to help thousands of people every year in quite a tangible way. And that's really rewarding. You know, like yesterday, you know, I'm working with men who are in gangs and in the criminal justice system, and we can relate as people, and I can empathize with their feelings because I've had the similar feelings. And while our life contexts might have been different, there's a shared humanity in us, and I'm able to communicate in a way that they get, and they can communicate in a way that I get, and then we're able to, all right, so how do we work on this? And it's not like I'm talking down to people, because I still have my moments. Like I can still be reactively angry, and whilst I don't act on that, I can definitely feel in it. I can definitely like raise my voice. I can definitely say stupid stuff. And it's like, how do you help your brother who can be reactively angry but like stab someone or shoot someone or be physically violent in their relationship? Things I've not done, because I've had some degree of self-control and self-awareness, and that's evolved. How do you help them sort of walk down the steps, you know what I mean? And had I not had my difficult experiences, perhaps I couldn't do that so well.
Yeah.
Richie, you do a lot of workshops with young guys combining kickboxing with also fitness for their minds. What sort of things do you cover in your time together?
So I wrote my master's degree on the notion of masculinity. So there are many masculinities, this theory say, right? In that if we think about sex, we're talking about biology. If we're talking about gender, we're talking about the sociological expectations we put on one another, right? And so there's this dominant idea of what they call hegemonic masculinity, the ideas that we're acculturated, that are so prevalent that we don't even think about them. It's like, that's just the way boys are. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this truck thing that we were talking about, digger thing we're talking about, that's like a biological, neurological, as far as I understand, driver of male interest, right? But the color blue, for example, is something that we've coded as masculine. I don't know if there's any literature that shows us that boys naturally gravitate towards blue things, for example. And then there are all these other things around being a boy that you're told from a young age, like, oh, don't cry. And I remember, so my mother's family is from Lebanon, and my dad's family is like good European, you know, Welsh, working class. My grandfather worked on the railroads. And I remember him saying, "Are you too big to give me a kiss?" Because my Jiddi, my Lebanese grandfather, we always kiss, you know what I mean? And there's a cultural component to that, right? You know, harden up, don't cry, things you might have heard other boys be told. There's this peer policing on the playground and in school about what's okay behavior for a boy and what's not. And you get in the in group or you get in the out group. And when I started at high school, I went to an all-boys school that was famous for rugby, very working class. And my friends and I were like fruity, emo, alternative kids with like nose rings. And I had like all sorts of blue and green hair, and I wore a kilt and yellow shoes, and did not work out in the social hierarchy of my tough sporting school. But when I got in a fist fight at school once, and I write about this in my master's because it's an easy way to explain, I went from being culturally excluded for feminized or gender non-conforming, we would say now, behavior and appearance, to, oh, yo, bro pass. The bro's good at fighting. Suddenly got cool. I leant into that. Got rid of all my crazy hair. Started wearing baggy jeans and basketball singlets and caps, and you know, got my first tattoo at 18. And do you know what I mean? But we do that a lot, and this is what I talk about in my work with young men a lot, and older men. Like, how do we give each other a social permission to be a bit more authentic? Because if we're always hammering off the soft parts of ourselves, or the things that we code as feminine or not okay for boys to be like, then we're actually pushing ourselves into this limited box of acceptable behavior. And I'm sure you can all think of that, like be tough, use violence, be homophobic, be anti-feminine, be sexist, pursue wealth. That's all. There's a mountain of academic research that says the more you pretend to be like that all the time, the worse it is for you psychologically. So if you look at the research, like, boys aren't actually winning. Boys are far more likely to kill themselves or be a victim of violence, like physical violence, and far more likely to perpetrate violence. Boys are failing in education, like across the Anglosphere. Boys aren't more likely to go on to the 1% CEO jobs. And I think what we've done is conflated that 1% with the reality of most boys and men when we have arguments about male privilege. And I think that actually does a great disservice in advancing gender equitable outcomes. Because when you talk like that, the way many activists do, it doesn't actually bring boys and men into the conversation. And what we're starting to see is this retreat into traditional notions of masculinity. Because if you wake up in bed and you feel hopeless and despairing and school's not going very well for you and your dad is someone you've never met, you don't feel privileged.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I try and break that down for our boys and say, look, there are a lot of dickheads on the internet who will yell at you. Don't listen to them. You know, like, you don't have to be tough and have a car and like guns and be violent. If you're gay, that's cool, bro. Like, at the same time, I'm like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to have sex with a hot girl at high school. That's normal. But there are respectful and kind and polite ways to ask someone on the date. You know, like, what pornography is teaching us is the de facto sex education is really, really unhealthy. And there's no kindness or consent or mutual pleasure or decency there for the people that you should be, at the very least, having fun with, if not in a loving relationship with. It's always like this asymmetrical power dynamic, and women are paid to pretend to like being hurt and degraded. And our boys soak that up, and we don't give them critical education around that. And in very real terms, women and girls are getting physically hurt because of that, right? And again, that falls out of those dominant ideas around masculinity that we do a real poor job of talking about. Like, if you go and look at social media or mainstream music culture or music video culture, there are all these like stereotypes of masculinity that are perpetuated and reinforced every day. And I don't see, I mean, schools are actually, to be fair, starting to do a good job of talking about it. Like, some schools are doing a real good job of bringing in different outside experts from Australia and New Zealand to break down some of these gender dynamics and help boys have more permission to present a broader range of life to one another and not get shamed for it. But I still think we have a long way to go. So yeah, I run workshops like that, and I use like the fighting as a Trojan horse, right? Because not every young dude wants to come and talk about, hey bro, have you heard about this shit called masculinity? I want to talk to you about it. But they're interesting because I've been around fighting a long time, and I'm fortunate enough to know some really talented, famous athletes, guys in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC and stuff, and you know, I leverage off their coolness because I'm just like some old dude with some lectures and stuff. So they come for the fighting, but they stay for the lectures. And then they're like, oh, yo, I never thought about that. That was dope, you know?
Yeah. So good. Actually, because I've got a 7-year-old boy, and I've been thinking, like, do I get him to go and do some classes at this age? What are some of the things, the benefits of actually learning kickboxing or one of those?
Yeah, I actually did some research for UNESCO on this, looking at martial arts programs and how they help young people move towards achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And while I forget the data, essentially, we found programs all around the world, from Belfast to the Middle East to the Nine Boxing Academy, and kids enrolled in well-structured, well-taught martial arts programs had really good outcomes. Like, people, I think, see the press conferences and the drama and the reels of professional athletes who are hamming it up to make millions and millions of dollars. And unfortunately, that does, I think, obscure the socially positive benefits of martial arts. And people think, oh, it's just violence and it's just braggadocio and all these tropes of masculinity that aren't helpful and that I do try and deconstruct, right? But to your question, self-esteem, self-confidence, the ability to defend yourself, the world is dangerous. Not to overplay it, but like the world is dangerous, and I think all people need to know how to defend themselves and have situational awareness and look out for predators, boys and girls. I think a lot of the violence that is a risk for us comes from insecurity, particularly for boys. Boys are posturing and they use violence to show other people that they're cool, or they're using violence to achieve like some sort of like status hierarchy, right? If you're a secure person, you don't need to go around smashing up people and put it on TikTok, right? If you want to fight, here's a pathway to that. And we'll put rules and gloves and regulations, and there's mutual respect and honor in it, and you shake hands afterwards. And some people want to do that. We talked about some boys like trucks and diggers and stuff. Not every boy wants to fight. Not every girl wants to play with Barbies, right? But some do. And how do we allow the boys that are interested in like rough stuff channel that in a way that is safe and they take social benefit from? You know, there's community in it. There's, you know, I've got lifelong friends from my own journey in martial arts, and I know that's far from unique. You know, just today, can I tell you a story?
Yeah.
You're like, dude, enough of the stories. You know, like I'm a person on a journey, right? And I still get it wrong too. And so on the weekend, there were some fights on Sunday, like kickboxing fights. I got this young lad, cool. He's like, he just is in the gym every day. He's 16 years old. His dad's not on the scene. He just loves coming and training with the older guys. Only been training 8 months. He's got a fair bit of natural talent. He had a fight on Sunday, you know, shin pads, first time against another boy his own age. My boy, like, smoked his opponent. The second round was close. First round, he smoked him. Third round, smoked him. And smoked means, like, really won.
Yeah,
you know? Like, and I was like, yes, let's go. We totally got that. Like, we won that fight. That was not even close. And then the judge said, the ring announcer said, split decision, which means one judge says we won, or someone won. And then my boy lost, right? And I was just like, it was not my finest self. And I walked over to the judge who I know. I was like, what fight were you watching? Like, I can't believe it. And like, my face goes into like anger face. And I don't have a very good angry face. It's like very angry. And I look like an idiot. I look like an aggressive, poor sport. And, you know, yesterday I emailed all the judges. I'm really sorry about that. It was very unprofessional, very unbecoming of me. To your point, like, what are the benefits of martial arts? Today, my friend Jason Sadi, who's, he's 50 years old now, and I met him through fighting when I was 17 years old, and he was, like, tough. Like, he was a hard man, 6-time world champion. He rang me up, 50 years old. He was like, hey, bro, you know, all jokey and stuff. He's like, that wasn't cool. You know, like, he checked my behavior in a way that, like, a father could have, you know what I mean?
Wow.
You know, I'm not close with my father, and he rang me up just to check. And I'm like, yeah, I know, bro. Like, I was a real dick. And I'm out here on social media talking about, like, control your emotions. He's like, I know, bro. Some people have texted me. And I'm like, I know, but I've already apologized to everyone. Like, you need community around you. Doesn't matter if you're 5, 15, 35 or 45, right? And you need people to bounce ideas off and be a boundary and to love and respect you and deliver information and teaching that you'll listen to. And martial arts, just like rugby or dance or drama, can be a space for that.
Yeah, I love that story, Richie. It's kind of around being strong, but also being humble, because being able to say sorry means that you've taken your defences down and you've been willing to kind of look inside and think, not really what I wanted to portray. But often people don't do that other half, which is to actually admit that they were wrong.
Dude, I was grappling with it because that was a really bad decision. I'm like, oh, dude. But irrespective of that, I was wrong, right? Two things can be true at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Like, I could think that's a really bad judging decision. I mean, and it's a sport, so who cares in the big scheme of things? Stupid thing to get upset about. But also my response to that was wrong. I was grappling about it, and I was like, yo, dude, like, stop being a little kid. Like, you were wrong, say you were wrong. I love and care about all those people that were those judges there in my community.
Yeah.
If I had not put out that apology and asked for forgiveness and said, hey, I hope there's no hard feelings, then maybe there would have been some hard feelings. And like, oh yeah, Richie's like actually a bit of a dick. And like, he's not very, you know what I mean?
He's not walking what he's preaching.
Yeah. And like, I think that's the problem with modern age is all of us have moments like I had, right? I'm sitting here telling however many people that I'm a person and that I make mistakes. And sometimes I do let my emotions override my critical thinking, right? And I think that's the problem, I think, with like, you know, I talked about being at odds with modern social justice culture, because you think about like cancel culture and people losing their jobs and their reputations and their livelihoods for like one moment of saying the wrong thing. And I think that's where we have this lack of forgiveness and this lack of empathy and this lack of maturity for the human experience now. And there is a lack of self-reflection, I think, from a lot of that social justice crowd, which, it's not very becoming. You know, like I want the world to be a better, kinder place. Yeah. Not a self-righteous, judging, like you're done. It's like one and done. And yet that's what culture drives people to. You know, like we pull the pitchforks out, no due process. It's like an accusation alone now is proof of guilt. And that's really worrying, because what if you're on the other end of that accusation one day, you know, and then there's tens of thousands of faceless strangers destroying you and like bypassing all your psychological defense mechanisms. And that happens all the time. And like the new book came out, The Anxious Generation. Did you check that out?
Yeah.
You know, like I'm so glad that it's made such a wave. But what are we doing about it? You know, like the evidence is now unequivocal that social media is wrecking teen mental health. Epic rates of anxiety, depression, loneliness, self-harm. Well, how do we regulate that? We really need, I think, some both legislative intervention so that no young person can actually have a social media account under the age of 16. But we need role modeling from parents. And we also need cultural change. Like instead of rewarding people for being effectively an online bully, why don't we just like, well, what do you know about that person? When did you meet them? Like, what has this got to do with you? You know, because people are quick to light the fire. Yeah. And it's like the accusations on page 1, but the retraction and the apologies on like page 13, right? In small print. You know? Yeah. And that happens all the time. People who think they're on the right side of history who lead those campaigns. And it's gross.
Yeah.
Richie, you think really deeply and you're immersed in a whole lot of stuff.
I know, it's real bad. People are like, who the heck is this guy? And like, people ask me questions and I just give you like a podcast, like all by myself. I'm sorry. I spend a lot of time in my head by myself. Yeah. And when people ask me, I'm like, do you really want to go in there?
No, we're enjoying this. How do you maintain your own mental health when you're immersed and you care about so much?
I vent to strangers on the couch. People go, I do podcasts. I do podcasts and I just am like, this is some stuff I think about. What do you think? I see a psychologist every week. I first went and saw a psychologist when I would have been like 24. And my mum was asking me something and I was like, I just heard all the time, to be honest with you, Mum. This is just a very raw interview. But yeah, and when I was 24, I heard all the time. And my girlfriend had just been cheating on me and I don't know, whatever. I had a messed up childhood and I heard all the time. And I first went to a psychologist, worked on some stuff, but then I ended up getting separated and then divorced in my 30s. And I was like mental. Like, I know you're not meant to say mental, but I was like really mentally ill for like years in my 30s. Some people wouldn't know it. I missed a lot of work and lost a lot of pleasure. Ate my feelings. I'm sober and I don't use alcohol or drugs and stuff. But I love some sugar. yeah, just it was a terrible time. And I went back to see a new psychologist, and that really helped me not kill myself. And then I got better, and now I just use seeing as the same psychologist as, like, I guess, professional supervision.
Awesome.
I'm like, yo, this kid, like, did this or this. You know, I hear about, can I speak frankly? I mean, I'm already speaking frankly. But I hear about, like, rapes and murders and childhood sexual abuse. And, like, I get told firsthand the most insane things. Some of the people that I've worked with have gone on to perpetrate more harm or be experienced, you know. And I read about all of this stuff all the time as well. And it's a lot, dude.
My mum used to say to me that hurting people hurt. And she told me that when I was quite young. And it really stood with me through high school and actually took some of the sting out of some of that stuff that would happen. Because I'd be like, if you're doing this to me, what's happening to you?
Yeah.
I'm still working on that. If I'm honest with everyone, which I'm being painfully today, it's like my first instinct is, how do I get revenge? And I never do that, but that's what I think, right? And then because that's, when it comes to, like, my stress response, fight or flight, it's like always fight for me, right? I'm like, ah. Like, but this is the difference, right? I can notice that.
Yeah.
Because I've done enough work on myself most of the time. Sometimes I can get angry, right? But I won't physically act on that anger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
does.
And it's like, how do we help people not do... I mean, I guess I'm working with an extreme group of people who do use physical violence. How do you help them step that back, right? But how do we help all people do that? So we don't yell at our kids, right? Sucks when you yelled at your kids.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
And then it's actually learning how to say sorry.
Yo, I did that last night.
I'm sorry.
I didn't even yell at my son. I just was like, I asked you to get in bed, you know, and stay in bed, you know, and brush it, you know, and he's always finding one reason to, like, get out of bed one more time, right? And I gave him an exasperated lecture, and it wasn't terrible, but it was unfair.
Yeah.
It was an unfair response, and I was being a real dick and taking out my tiredness. A lot of us walk around on, like, 99, right? And then something happens and then we're on 100.
Yep.
So how do we help ourselves walk around on, like, a 30, you know, or 45? So when someone cuts us off in traffic or says something mean to us on the internet or something else, perhaps far more serious happens, that we don't leap to the worst response.
Yeah. I think through parenting, like, I've learned how to say sorry so much better. And I think too, saying sorry as parents is something that still feels kind of new, you know, to actually go, hey,
you mean like culturally?
Yeah, I've made a mistake here. I shouldn't have raised my voice. And I think when I used to apologize, it was like, you know, I'm sorry. But because you did this, well, you know, and it's actually cutting that off and just saying, I'm sorry, that was me.
I love that you say that because, you know, to continue with the theme, when I messaged my friends on Facebook about that kickboxing thing, I wasn't like, it was a really bad decision, but I'm sorry. I just said, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Because otherwise it's... Because I did used to be like that. You know, my early relationship was like, oh, well, I'm sorry I did this, but blah, 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 blah. You know, and then it's not really a sorry. It's like a justification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was at a talk last night for parents of a preschool, and one dad asked a question at the end and he said, should I be saying sorry to my kids? And I said, yeah. Yep, not all the time. You don't want to be the dad that's always apologising because you've got this, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm a mess and I'm going to apologise for everything I do. But I said there'll be times when you need to say sorry, and you need to say sorry without the but. Because often we say, I'm sorry for yelling at you, but if you had done what you were meant to, I wouldn't have needed to. So we've got to remove that. So your apology was beautiful because there was no but. You know, you made me angry, and therefore the apology is sort of like a half apology or a quarter of apology. But when we own our stuff, what a gift to give our kids.
Well, yeah, that's it, right? Like, I do think you're right. I think you can overly coddle your children and be apologetic for setting a boundary. And I think that's just as damaging as the other end of it.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps not just as damaging, but it's still not great.
Well, kids really feel a bit scrambled when they're not sure who's
the parent?
Yeah,
Who's the boss?
Who's setting the lead?
Not the
you know?
boss. Is that the wrong word? I don't know. But
it's
their children,
yeah.
right? I feel like there is this sort of movement in some sectors to like overly. What do you call it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, there's a hesitancy or a overthinking, or we're not backing ourselves enough, thinking, I wonder if that was right. And that's partly because we're reading so much stuff that we're not sure what to land on in parenting. So parents are sort of thinking, I wonder if that's right, or maybe I did that wrong. And so the uncertainty is read by the children as there's a lack of sort of a sturdy leader, as Dr. Becky calls it, or just a strong but gentle leader.
Yeah, I love that. You meet young people who are quite anxious. I meet a lot of like affluent, anxious people who perhaps could do with some of that gentle strength and guidance.
Yeah, they're looking for it. They really
are, aren't they?
Yeah,
I think kids want boundaries to bounce off. They want to test you, but then they need to know that they can't overstep that line, and if we don't put that boundary in there, we're not really serving them any more than we're serving them by being overly restrictive. I think kids need room to make mistakes and fall over, literally and metaphorically. And if we don't let them do that and we're overly protective,
it's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a fine balance. They think that, if I'm strict or I put a boundary up or I say no too much, my kid feels restricted or unloved or like I'm a mean parent. Like I worry that some parents want to be friends with their kids and be cool. And actually, sometimes the most loving thing to do is be like, nah, that's actually wrong.
Yeah.
It's not a cool way to show up in the world, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I think that there's also can be a swing from we might not want to parent like our parents did. So sometimes the pendulum swings and we think anything that was strict or controlling, I'm not going to do. And it just sort of goes too far the other way. And we're just trying to bring it back to just that stable, being able to set a boundary, know that your child's going to feel big feelings. They're going to be really sad or mad or hurt or disappointed. You're going to offer them that tender support, but you're going to keep to the boundary. You're not going to move it or adjust it or even lecture them about it. You're going to keep it there. And you're going to be soft about their feelings and say, I know you're sad and I'm here for you. But there is no way you're going to start negotiating the boundary. You're
I love that. I needed to hear that. Thank you.
Quite often in this podcast we talk about the magic and the mess of parenting because we have it all. Where are you at the moment finding the magic?
It's all pretty magical. I think my 10-year-old had cross-country, right? I love long-distance running. And historically, when I was 10 years old, I hated running. I hated cross-country. I always would, pull a sickie. But as a teenager and adult, I became a jock, essentially. It became full gym nerd. Regardless, my eldest son is quite an arty kid, but he's also pretty athletic if he wants to be. I've been running with him because he's had these sporting things and he's been quite worried and anxious about it. And I think he feels a bit of pressure to do well. And I'm like, dude, I don't care if you come dead middle or dead last, as long as you try your best. Because
run your race.
Yeah, run your race. Because just out the gate a couple of years ago, he came third place out of the whole thing. And then last year, he didn't try it all and walked it and came dead last. And that's when we were a bit yo, dude, that's not cool. You've got to try, it doesn't matter. So he come sixth this time around. And I felt really fun for me to go running with him. Not because I care where he comes, but just because I want him to try his best and enjoy moving like that. Because after I go running with him, with Jack, he's actually in a great mood, And I feel like when you can give kids a love of movement, whatever that movement is, could be creative dance or whatever, doesn't have to be organized sport, you're actually giving them lifelong tools, right? Bad mood, move your body, good mood. So that's real magic for me. It feels cool, to, I guess, share something that's been really beneficial for me, running, which might sound simplistic, with him, but then also have real cool conversations.
Is there a particular book that you recommend or advice you give to a new parent about to start this journey?
Unpack your blind spots. And like, that's always a journey, right? Even relationships. I think if I'm thinking in idealistic terms, parents, whatever the makeup, need to have healthy relationships with the person they're making a human being with. And many don't. And it's unequivocal that children who don't have stable parenting figures have worse life outcomes across all averages. It shouldn't be a controversial statement because there's just mountains of sociological and criminological and psychological data that shows us that, as well as our lived experiences, right? So if you're having a kid, whether with someone you hooked up with on Tinder or with your husband, you need to work with that person and with yourself to figure out what it is that needs healing, you know? Because if you don't do that, you're going to transmute that onto your children invariably, I would argue. And that's a real tragedy, you know? Your trauma is not, to you, I mean, I know the word trauma is overused, I think, and people are like, oh, my cat died, it's a trauma. Like,
yeah,
you know, like, yo, dog, that's just part of life. But, you know, like if bad stuff's happened to you or mental illness runs in your family or addiction runs in your family or you're exposed to family violence or poverty or, you know, like extreme levels of it, if all these sorts of things are in your sphere, whatever it is, like, you know, you saw something terrible and you never felt the same afterwards, you really owe it to yourself first and foremost, but then also to your children and your grandchildren to do that work, whatever that looks like. So I think that is actually really good parenting advice. So I think we can all do that, and we all need to do that. And even if you had like an absolute Brady Bunch childhood, absolutely, like you got the pony and, you know, mum and dad always holding hands and cuddling, and you got dessert on Fridays, and you know what I mean? If that was you, still worth doing some exploration, right?
Yeah.
What are your blind spots, you know, and how do you help be mindful of that?
It's good.
I don't think any of us get it through life without needing to have a look at what's been going on. And I think kids are a great invitation to grow and develop. So are relationships. And I love that you have brought what I consider one of the most important things. People come and see me for coaching, but often what it is not a strategy they need, because they've usually tried lots of strategies. It is actually to look within themselves and think, you know what, I'm really angry about this stuff and something else is going on and I actually need to, you know, subcontract to somebody else or get some help for what I need to do about my own issues, and not think that it's a parenting issue so much as it's something about me. And to do it kindly and compassionately, because all of us actually need to get on with ourselves. Richie, when your boys leave home, they've got a backpack of, you know, the values you've instilled and the love that they've been immersed in. What would you like to see them take away with them?
I think, like, I have this tattoo on my wrist. It says PMA, which means positive mental attitude. Comes from the whole hardcore punk rock scene that I grew up in, right? Life is an invariably difficult and painful endeavor, which again is not meant to be controversial. It's just, it is. Like, you're always going to let down. Everyone you love is going to die. You are going to grow old and die. And we can't stop that. But how we respond to the invariable challenges of life, the goods and the bads, requires, I think, a degree of a positive outlook, right? Like, what are the positive things that you can put in practice for when you feel pain? Whether that's sitting with that pain and crying and screaming and writing it down and singing along to your favorite melancholic song when your girlfriend breaks up with you, to seeing a therapist. You know, like, what are the positive things? And what are the positive things that you can look at for the difficult experiences? Because pain can be a great teacher too, right? You know, like, your perspective shapes your reality, and you're never powerless to change your perspective. You always have that agency and you have that ability, and It takes practice, but it's possible. You know, you can be a victim or you can be a victor on any given situation, depending on how you choose to look at it. And I want my boys to know that.
That was a deep conversation. I think that might have been our deepest so far.
Yeah, it was.
So many things. I just want to go on a long walk and re-listen to this and just, let everything sit and kind of go, what do I think of that? And what could I be doing with that? For me, actually going, what are my blind spots? You know, I've done a lot of work through my own childhood and different things that I've needed to look at so that I could come into parenting, you know, in a good, healthy place. But kids have this amazing, amazing talent of getting their little fingers and finding those little spots maybe that you still need to work on. So I think it's actually a really good reminder for all of us, no matter what work we've done, no matter what, like Richie was saying, no matter if you've had a really easy childhood or a hard one, it's really good to stop and kind of think, what's kind of hurting? What's my child found in me that maybe I need to do a little bit more work on?
Yeah, it's a wonderful invitation, and I think we should be curious about our parenting and not defensive. You know, I remember asking our kids, what do you really like that we do and what do you not like or wish we did less of, thinking they won't have much to comment on, you know, we're doing pretty well. And then being really offended that they came up with stuff. And I thought, well, I asked them, you really kind of needed to. Yeah, and then you look at, why am I so defensive about this? Why is it so important to me? Why do I not like even feeling that I'm imperfect as a parent? And so making peace with that I'm not everything. And that I have areas to grow in. And this is one area my children would love me to be more present with their games, or play more board games, or go for a walk with them, or actually do some of the, things like watch TV with them. Just stuff that I think really is that as important as you can come up with. But I think that asking kids a question like that also opens up some of the blind spots that we might have.
I've not done that before. I'm going to do that tonight at dinner. But I'll also have to make sure that I have I'm not going to be offended by anything, that it's going to be a safe place. Share away. We'll see what we come up with.
And if you don't like the first take, Dayna, just ask them again another day, because, you know, sometimes the second round they come up with more stuff.
Great. More to work on. I love too talking about like the magic in parenting, and there's, you know, many hard things that Richie brought up, you know, things at school and society that we have to work hard to, you know, educate and protect our children. But I loved how he talked about just going running with his boy Jack and the joy and the magic and the simplicity. And I think, you know, I remind myself that quite often with my kids, you know, you get in these routines and the same, but I know it's the stuff I'll miss one day, making their breakfast in the morning and sitting and chatting while I have a coffee, the funny chats in the drive to school, you know, those little things. Sometimes we live for the big holidays and the big magic, but it's the little magic that's pretty amazing.
Children find those little things really amazing, and they're great emotional kind of tank fillers that you will take one child shopping with you. You might be just going to Bunnings or somewhere, but they've been asked to come with you, and you stop on the way and look at Diggers, or you buy an ice cream. Children do love us to do things with them, and I don't think we should underestimate the value of perhaps taking one child at a time, just to give them that sense of being seen and being significant and being valued, and to have ordinary chats and every now and then having a magnificent chat, because in amongst the quantity of time, because there's little dabs at being with our kids, there will be some gem time when you actually land on something that's really, they open their heart up, and you're busy, maybe even in the supermarket, and they've said something quite stunning or that sat with you, and you just realise being present with your kids, maybe one at a time, is a lovely way to love our kids.
There was much talked about, and there was a lot of sadness shared, a lot of tough stuff. But I also find there's a lot of hope, when you look through it, when you think of these conversations that are happening, us doing the work, people like Richie in Hard Spaces, having the conversations and doing these workshops. There's a lot of hope in the tough stuff. And maybe you were listening today and it brought up something for you, and we don't want you to feel left there with that. So do reach out, parentingplace.nz. We're here to help parents feel confident so that children feel deeply loved. So if we can help you on your parenting journey, please get in touch. We're here and we'd love to do anything to help.
Rover. Music, radio, podcasts.